Hi everyone and welcome to this week's video. It's great to have you back here with me in the garden. It has been a really slow start to getting some warm weather this year. It feels like it's been a bit of an endless grey, cold, gloomy period that we've been in. Lots of rain and wind, and just in the last 48 hours the temperatures have started to rise and it looks like we're going to get some sunshine. We've had some beautiful blue skies this morning. It's just started to cloud over now, but it was lovely earlier on. And I've been hardening off some of my annuals for the last 10 days or so, just waiting for those temperatures to rise so that I can get them planted outside. Last week while I was hardening them off in the day, the temperatures were dipping to -3 overnight, so I didn't want to risk it at that stage. So this week, now that the temperatures are coming up well above freezing and the forecast is looking good for the next 10 days or so, I'm going to get them out in the ground. Definitely overdue getting them out. Normally I would get my hardy annuals out a lot earlier than this. So we'll get them in the ground. That'll free up space in the greenhouse, which is great because it's starting to get very crowded in there with all the more tender seeds that I'm sowing just now. I'll show you how I'm getting on with that. We've got some sunflowers that have just germinated this week, and we've got lots of statice, we've got helichrysum, those perennial seeds that we sowed. Some of them are coming on really well, and I'll do a separate video with a catch up on them very soon as well, so you can see how we're doing with that. So having a look back, this is what Cloudberry flowers usually looks like in April and into May. So this was a really different year where I didn't plant any spring bulbs. I didn't plant hyacinths, I didn't plant any new muscari, fritillaria or tulips. And the reason behind that was because that I was going back into a period of retraining in a job that I used to do, and I started working in the hospitals again a few days in the week. And I didn't think that I was going to have the time to be able to look at them properly. I didn't know what my hours would be and what this spring would look like. But I've actually really missed having them. We've had some lovely narcissi in the garden, but that was the only flower that I had. I couldn't make a bouquet up, I couldn't make a jar arrangement, and I didn't have enough flowers to offer florists in April. So next year I am going to go back to planting a limited amount of these. Planting thousands of tulips like I was starting to do was just a step too far for my business if I was going back to work in another job. When you're planting that many tulips, you have to be on site all the time to harvest them at the correct stage to get the peak vase life for your florist. You want to get them at that cracked bud stage when there's just colour coming in. If they fully open, then that's too late. You've missed your chance. So you can be harvesting tulips 5-6 times a day when the weather suddenly gets a little bit sunny and brings them all on. And if you're working somewhere else, you just can't do that. So next year the plan is that I will plant a smaller number of bulbs so that I do have the opportunity, if I want to provide some bouquets or jar arrangements and some flowers for florists, but without that pressure of doing huge volumes of flowers. That just isn't working for me. And that's the thing about flower farming. Everybody doing it is doing it in a different way, and you have to work out what fits and is right for your business. So that's the plan, to reintroduce a small amount of spring planting each year, but just not to do too high a volume. So let's go and have a look just now. We're going to look in the greenhouse and see what's happening in there. We're going to go out to the flower patch and we're going to have a look at me planting out some of my hardy annuals. So I've got some Orleas, got some Amimagus, we've got some Daucus, a few cornflowers. I didn't get very many through this winter actually, which surprised me. I'm not sure what happened there, but I've just got a few left to go out, but at least they will offer me some early flowers in a few weeks' time. And I've got lots and lots that are not far behind. I'm hardening them off just now, that'll go in the ground at the weekend, I think. So on the way up to the greenhouse, let's just have a little look at some of the other things that are flowering at the moment and making the garden really beautiful. It's peak blossom time in the garden just now. That first week in May, it just looks absolutely stunning, and as long as the weather holds and we don't get too much wind and rain, then we should be able to enjoy it for a couple of weeks. And then we've got lots of lovely bluebells just coming out, and forget-me-nots in the garden. Down at the bottom area where we don't cut the grass and it's longer here, we get some beautiful bluebells and forget-me-nots. One of the flowers that's been really successful this long cold spring has been the honesty that I've been growing in the garden. It's been really prolific and really pretty. We've got some lovely purple honesty and we've got some white honesty as well. It's just starting to come to an end now where the petals are just past their best, but it has been very, very pretty. Some narcissi just still flowering. You can see here though that they're just slightly damaged this year around the edges of the petals, and I think that's been all the wet weather and the rain. Did manage to get a wee drop away to florist in the last couple of weeks, but not as many this year as I would have liked to have done just because of the petal damage. So getting up towards the greenhouse now, we can see more of the lovely blossom on the trees. So hardening off for me normally happens when it gets to about March time, but here we are and it's the first week of May and I'm still hardening off hardy annuals and haven't got them in the ground. And that's just because the weather has been so poor with temperatures below freezing and lots of wind and rain. I've just held off putting them outside. Now though, it's time for all these hardy annuals to be outside in the garden. They'll grow a lot better there. They are cool weather flowers. They don't need to be in a hot greenhouse. I mean, it is starting to get much warmer in there in the daytime just in the last few days, and you want to be growing on your more tender plants in there. There's lots of ways to work out your plant spacing outside, but what I'm doing today is I've got 2 old barbecue skewers and I'm using a tape measure to measure, and I've got a permanent marker here. What I'm going to do is just go along 9 inches and then I'm going to go along 6 inches and I'm going to mark that on with my pen. And then once I've done that, I'm then going to just chop the barbecue skewers with a pair of scissors. And then they will be the right length to pop in between my plants for spacing outside, and that just makes it a little bit easier. So back down at the flower patch, for the last couple of weeks I have been working on getting the beds prepared ready for planting out, and I've removed any surface weeds and added a lovely layer of mulch them with our own homemade compost, and it really does make a difference adding this layer to your soil and your beds ready for planting. So this is my little barbecue skewer here that I've cut to 6 inches, and as you can see it makes it really easy just to space your plants. So I can just make my first planting here and then I will then go and make my next one up here, and you can do the same that way as well if you want to do 6 inches between them in your rows. So I'm going to plant some Orlea first. I'm just making my first planting hole here and then I'll be able to get my Orlea pots out. So this is Orlea that has overwintered. I've managed to get it through the winter and it's got a good root system on it here, but it'll be much happier outside now in the cooler temperatures than the greenhouse, and it'll be able to grow away and produce flowers fairly soon, I would think, towards the end of May, beginning of June. And you can just see here, that's me checking my spacing with my marker between the 2 that I've planted here. Just keep going until we've got all of our Orlea planted out and then go on to the next plant. So my Orlea I'm going to plant 6 inches apart, and I'm not going to plant it really far apart because I think if you plant it closer together then that promotes it growing into taller stems outside. So we'll see if that works. I did quite large spacing last year and didn't feel like I needed quite as much spacing as all that, so I've reduced it from 9 to 6 inches this year and we'll see how that works. On the other hand, my Daucus is a larger plant. It should spread more, so I've done that 9-inch spacing. And my Gypsophila Covent Garden as well, I've done 9-inch spacing for this too because it's a branching habit and it will take up more room in the garden as well. So not all my flowers have been in the greenhouse over the winter that I've tried to get through. Some have been outside in the ground. And this is Phacelia, which has overwintered outside. And I got a good question last week asking whether or not it could tolerate any frost. And this was just to show you that this was uncovered outside last week and it was down to -3 degrees. And it's been outside all winter. And it has been a fairly mild winter from Scottish standards, but we have still gone below freezing a number of times and it's come through really well. If you want to find out more about growing Phacelia, there is a how to grow Phacelia video on my channel. So I want to take you up into the perennial garden and show you how we're getting on up there. So let's go and have a look. Just passing some nice Spurria bridal wreath that's just finishing flowering. And the perennial garden, it is a work in progress at the moment. I'm trying to get on top of each of the beds, take one at a time. A lot of the plants are getting quite well established now. I've got some nice hesperus there that's about to start flowering. And I've been working on some of the beds as well. Some had got a little bit overgrown. So here I have been mulching this bed with our homemade compost, and it should be ready to plant in now. It's amazing the difference that a few weeks can make. As you can see here, this astrantia has put on a lot of growth. The hellebores are starting to get really established in this area of the garden as well. They are a few years old now and starting to bulk out. The stilby is starting to put on some nice growth. It's a little bit frost damaged on some of its leaves, but I don't think that'll be lasting damage. We've got Lady's Mantle coming through, and we've also got lots of Jacob's Ladder and Aquilegia. You can see here that's some nice Jacob's Ladder we've got there, and Aquilegia in the background. I'm really pleased with this Ravenswing growing from seed. It was a new plant last year and it's come back really strong this year. It's much bigger, and I really enjoy using that in late May bouquets. It's just a really nice filler. The white broom as well is starting to flower, and this has put on a lot of growth and is starting to be really pretty. It's not all just pretty flowers up here in the perennial garden. I do have problems as well with other things like nettles and also creeping buttercup. I think that's the worst of the lot, and this raised bed here I have not done anything with over the last year, and it's just completely overrun with creeping buttercup. Haven't done anything with it yet as there's some alliums coming through, but as soon as those have flowered I'm going to have to tackle it and see if we can start over with the bed. So today in one of the newly prepared areas I have been planting out Acacia the Pearl, and I've managed to grow this from seed over the winter. So it started off in the autumn, overwintered, hardened off, and now these are ready to get planted out, and they'll have some beautiful white flowers on them this year hopefully. So I've prepared another area of the perennial garden for sweet peas. I've mulched the beds, and I have then started a framework here of bamboo canes that I put together. I'm not going to grow as many sweet peas this year, so it's just a small area, and these will provide the support network that the sweet peas will need to grow up against. And I don't use any cordon method for sweet pea growing. I just grow them as standard, and this lovely compost will definitely help them grow. I've got this biodegradable jute netting that I'm going to use as a support network on my canes as well. Biodegradable jute netting is fantastic, and actually this has lasted me a couple of years now. This is I think my third year of using it, and it hasn't biodegraded yet. I've been able to reuse it for longer than I thought, and it's really great. It just loops on the top of the canes there, and you can just tie it in the bottom to provide a sturdy framework for the sweet peas to grow up against. And I'll just tie these in with twine as they get longer. I need a bit more support, and hopefully these will grow away well for me. So let's leave the sweet peas and the perennial garden and go back and talk about sowing seeds now and look in the greenhouse. Lots and lots of seed sowing at the moment. This is where the succession sowing comes in, that you just need to keep repeating your batches every few weeks so that you've got flowers all the way through the season, right through to September, October time. And if you want to find out more about succession sowing, I did a video last year that you can look up. I'll leave a link at the end of this video, and that's got some tips in it for how to manage that. So we talked a minute ago about succession sowing, and it's just so important to keep the sowing going at this time of year. You'll have been feeling like you've been sowing seeds for the last few months, so through February, March and April. But here going into May, this is when you want to get those seeds sown so that you'll get flowers at the very tail end of the season. So flowers in late August, September into October time. And these cornflowers here will be doing just that for me. They'll be giving me nice flowers at the end of the season. Here we've got some statice seedlings. So these were seed sown on the 20th of April and they're coming away now. And next week we're going to have that statice video out for you to watch. So lots going on in the greenhouse. We've got some definite successes so far this year in terms of seedlings, and we've got some that are just not doing as well. So we did get some Orlea through the winter, but for some reason this year it's been terrible at germinating for me, so I don't really have very many Orlea at all. I think they maybe are better off sown in the autumn time and trying to get them through the winter. Buplerium as well, not great germination this year as well. We've got some Buplerium here, which you can see from the label was sown on the 14th of February, but just one or two, we don't have many. Big successes have been the snapdragons. They have done really well. I always think that snapdragons look like they're going to do nothing for so long. They're just absolutely tiny little seedlings, and then they just suddenly start to take off, which is what's happened with the slightly warmer, sunnier weather. Over here we've got some Sweet William, and it's starting to grow away again as well. This was overwintered, this Sweet William, but it's done really well and started to grow now. It didn't really do much over the winter, but it's starting to put on growth. Here we have got corn cockles, and these are going to be alba ones and rose ones. I've decided not to grow as many of the purple ones this year. I'm going to try the paler ones instead. We've got some Salvia viridi blue here, which was really successful last year. Unfortunately, I have ran out of seeds just now, so I'm going to need to see if I can get some more of those and quickly get a batch on before it's too late. These are later snapdragons, so you can see they're quite a bit smaller than the ones I've just shown you. These were sown mid-March, and they're starting to put on growth now as well. Here we've got some slightly larger status that are growing away and will hopefully get transplanted out soon. Over here we've got some Helichrysum that was planted mid-March, and it's starting to grow away. What I have found is that Helichrysum seem to grow best from very fresh seed. I had some older seed and just didn't get any good germination at all. And over here we have got our Cosmos, which is growing away nicely. It'll need to get pinched out when we've got a few sets of leaves. And I'm trying lots of different varieties of Cosmos this year. I want to have a bit of a comparison to find my favourite. So I've got Daydream, and I have got Apricotta, and I've got Purity, and I've got Lemonade, and I've got Rabenza, and a few other Cosmos as well that I'm trying. So we're going to have a look at them later in the summer and see which are my favourite varieties. Over here we've got some Gypsophila, and Gypsophila is another one that you can pinch out once you've got a few pairs of true leaves, and that will make it give a bushier branching habit with more flowering stems to cut. So an awful lot going on in the greenhouse, and at this time of year it's really quite a rapid turnover. You're not keeping things in the greenhouse for as long. I am getting them going, and then when they get to about this stage they can start to go off and start to be outside a little bit and get used to the outside. I'll be planting them out far quicker than I would if I'd overwintered the annuals and kept them all over those months. These ones will be in here maybe 6-8 weeks, and then I'll be getting them hardened off and out into the garden. And then we'll be sowing the next batches. We've got some Amimagus here that was planted at the very beginning of April, and it is in its seed tray, so it'll need potted on now. We've got some true leaves on it, and it's time for it to grow on its own individual spaces. These are my sunflowers that I have got that have germinated, so I need to get these potted on, and I need to keep batches of my sunflowers going every couple of weeks so that I get a succession of flowers later on in the summer. Down at the bottom end of the greenhouse we've got the perennial seedlings that we started off, but I'm going to do a separate video on those so I can show you just how they're getting on in a couple of weeks' time. We've definitely had some successes with the perennial seed sowing at this time of year, and we've had some that haven't worked out so well as well. So it's going to be interesting looking at those and maybe trying the ones that didn't work in the autumn time and seeing if that is a better time to sow for some of them. So we've got the dahlias potted up in the greenhouse, and they're just starting to grow away well now. It has definitely taken them a while. This one is the furthest ahead that I've got this year, and other ones I'll show you in a minute are further behind, and I think the cold weather really stalled them for a while. We just didn't have any warm sunny days to get them into growth again. But I'm really looking forward to seeing which dahlias we can get this year. Last year we got a fantastic crop of dahlias, and it's turning out to be one of my favourite flowers later in the summer to grow. So you can see here, this is another dahlia that's doing well now, but it hasn't got a huge amount of growth on it yet. So we'll see how they get on over the next couple of weeks. And then we're looking at planting these out last week in May, first week in June. Just have to watch those last few days in May to check that there's not any cold overnight temperatures. Another good job at this time of year is just to go around the garden and snip off those faded Narcissan daffodils flower heads that you've got. And if you do that, then that just means that the plant will put energy back into the roots and the bulb for growing for next year. You want that bulb to get as much energy in it as possible so that you won't repeat good flowering. So I'm going to go around the garden and just see what there is. The Narcissi have finished quite early this year. Normally they would go into May for me another week, but this year they've gone over quite quickly, which has been surprising with the cool weather. So any faded daffodil heads or narcissi like this, you can just deadhead, and that will help the plant put energy back into that bulb for next year's display. So thanks very much for watching the video this week. I hope you enjoyed seeing what I've been doing in April and what stage I am at in the flower garden. I'm just in the middle of finishing off a how to grow video on Status, just to show you how I do that. It's all very individual flower growing, but I'm just sharing with you in these how to grow series my tips and what's worked for me and what hasn't worked over the last 10 years of growing. So I hope you enjoy that when I get it out, hopefully next week. Just got to do a little bit of filming of me planting the Status out because it's not far off being ready for that now. I'm going to leave you now with a last look at that lovely blossom while it's here, and also the very beginnings of the rhododendrons coming out.